Somebody in Vegas is not sold on the Baylor Bears despite a big victory over TCU a couple of weeks ago. They do have the 14-point loss against West Virginia and come in like a 6 or 6.5 point underdog at 2-loss Oklahoma. We bring in Brian Leigh of Bleacher Report to run down another huge matchup as the Big 12 does the word that we haven't talked about much in college football prior to 2014, but this seems to be the word in vogue. It's elimination game, Brian, and it's also cannibalization within the Big 12 between those two powers that only have one loss. So we talk Baylor, we talk Oklahoma, Brian, and the Bears had the miracle comeback against TCU, but the 14-point loss against West Virginia. So your thoughts about Baylor not playing a non-conference game of worth this year and then finding themselves back in the double digits in the college football rankings and really need to impress some people coming down the stretch.
Yeah, it's the non-conference schedule. I think it's very evident by where they are in the college football playoff rankings that the committee has noticed their lack of non-conference opponents. So they don't just need to win at this point. I think they need to win with style points, which is typically tough to find in Norman against a really good Oklahoma team, an Oklahoma team that actually has 2 losses, but is favored for a reason. It's the 2 games they lost were to a couple of teams that are in the top 10, and they were in those games the whole time. One could argue that even though they have less losses than Baylor, they've looked better on the whole this season.
Yeah, this Baylor team, I ripped them apart for that non-conference schedule. I think they need to realize that they're not the Baylor of 1995 or 2005, that they're a Big 12 contender, and they need to schedule as such. This is not the passing offense that we've seen of the last few years, still putting up capable numbers. Bryce Petty, one of the best in the business, but maybe not necessarily as explosive, putting up just the eye-popping numbers that they have in the past. Is there cause for concern there?
Yeah, the biggest question is whether Bryce Petty's really healthy. He hurt his back in the season opener. He missed a game, was coming in and out of the lineup. He's supposedly healthy. Everything coming out of camp saying he's healthy, but he hasn't looked the same as he has last year. He's missing. He's overthrowing deep routes, which was the big problem against West Virginia, and even early in the TCU game. He played out of his mind in the fourth quarter against TCU. He's capable of playing at the level at which he played last season, but he's been so much less consistent with his deep accuracy this year that it's easy to say maybe he's not healthy, maybe he's just having an off year, but that's the biggest difference between Baylor's offense in 2013 and 2014 right now is they used to take advantage of every opportunity they had to make a big play, and this year Petty's just missing some throws.
Now, if we're talking about star power on these two teams, and you mentioned the injury situation with Petty, we also have a situation with Sterling Shepard, who left last week's game for Oklahoma, their star wide receiver, who's just a dynamic player, little guy, dynamic player, and we're not sure what his status is this week as well, do we?
No, I think they upgraded him to probable last I checked. He's, for lack of a better term, a gamer. He's a real tough kid, and he really is the heart and soul of their passing game. I don't know how he's feeling, but I expect him to play just based on everything I've read. I don't know how effective he'll be. I don't know if he'll be the Sterling Shepard that's been so good in so many games this year, but he's going to give it a go. And he's going to give it a go against the Baylor secondary that either let up a big pass to Kevin White every time they threw to him or just dragged him down with a pass interference penalty. They struggled against a team that likes to target an All-American type receiver earlier this year. So if Sterling Shepard is healthy, he could give Baylor some trouble.
So let's stay on that line of thinking, because Trevor Knight was a quarterback that I saw a number of times last year, but most notably in the Baylor game. It was a 41-12 game, but it wasn't like a Baylor offense that ripped up the OU defense. It was more or less that Oklahoma could not move the ball. Trevor Knight looked atrocious in that game, the snaps that he received, and I just was not impressed with him as a quarterback. Then I flip on the Sugar Bowl. He's got 6 weeks to prep. I don't know what happened to the kid, but he just looked like a different quarterback, delivering with confidence, on time. Decision-making was flawless. just gunning the football, just with all sorts of confidence. And then he comes into this season, and so much is expected of him, and his performance has been a bit spotty.
Right. I actually don't think Knight played much of the Baylor game last year. I think that was still Blake Bell, which probably explains why he looked so bad. I think Blake Bell finished with a QB rating of 2 or something in that game. Knight got in a little bit. He ran some package plays, some running plays. I was really dubious of Knight coming into the season. I wasn't very high on him. Spotty is the right way to describe him. I actually think he's looked better than I thought he would. When he's running, as he was last week, this offense looks really hard to defend. And you were spot on saying that Baylor's offense didn't do to Oklahoma's defense what it did to everybody else last year. It's 41-12 is one of the most misleading final scores of last season, I think, because Oklahoma really held their own, and that was in Waco for the first half. And then eventually they got tired because their offense kept going 3 and out, because they kept having to punt, because they kept. If you give Baylor's offense enough chances, they're going to take advantage. So I think if Knight can fare better than he doesn't have to play like he did in the Sugar Bowl this week. He has to play a lot better than Blake Bell did against Baylor last year. He needs to pick up first downs. He needs to keep Baylor's offense off the field, because with enough rest, with not too many plays run by Baylor, Oklahoma's defense can shut them down. They really can. If Oklahoma keeps putting their defense in a bad spot, then Baylor's going to win this game.
So kind of the last setup for you, Brian, is that Oklahoma, with the 2 losses, is off the radar nationally. But this isn't much of a different team. I think we can use your analogy going back to the Arizona State-Notre Dame situation, that if you take away a play or two, and you can't do that, but it's one thing when you don't make a play because the other team's better. They strip sack you, they beat you on a long pass, and you can say, let's take away that play. Well, that's just the other team outplaying you. But miss a field goal, penalty, those things are kind of tough to overcome. And they had the Kansas State game right in their lap, and they missed the field goal, and just some other things went against them. Or else they're in the mix. They're probably considering their preseason ranking in the top 7 or 8 at this position. So Oklahoma, despite being off the radar, very much in play and a serious threat to win this game. And Vegas knows it, 6.5-point favorite at home.
Yeah, exactly. I think bring it back to the Arizona State game, and that's the difference is in this line, Vegas, they recognize that Oklahoma could easily be a 1-loss team. They're playing just as well, if not better, than the 1-loss team they're playing, and they've valued it accordingly. Whereas in the Arizona State game, they sort of valued it like Arizona State didn't win on a Hail Mary. But yeah, it's Oklahoma. It could make a strong case for being the best 2-loss team in the country. It's probably them and LSU arguing with each other about that. And I would pick Oklahoma just because of what we've seen them do, even against a team like Tennessee that's given people trouble in the SEC, that's playing good football. Oklahoma beat the crap out of Tennessee. They really did. Defensively, they tossed them around, and that's those big SEC boys that everybody likes to talk about. It's a big, mean defense. Jordan Phillips, the defensive tackle, might be one of my favorite players in the country. And I think it's a spiteful team. They know that they were supposed to be playoff contenders, and they probably cost themselves that shot already. And I think they're going to take pleasure in trying to just create chaos for the rest of the Big 12.
So we've got Oklahoma, we got Baylor. It's a showdown that Baylor needs to win to maintain college football playoff hopes for Oklahoma. They're playing spoiler at this point. They did not expect that as preseason number 3, but playing spoiler and with an outside shot of getting to that Big 12 championship with no championship game, of course, in that conference. Brian Leigh of Bleacher Report. Please check out his stuff on Bleacher Report. Brian Leigh writes some great stuff, covers all of college football, and really brings some insight to the table. Hey, Brian, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and the kind words.